You found it. Your home for the best content on your favorite team, the Fighting Tigers of LSU. Do us a favor, subscribe to the channel, leave your comments below, and be sure to smash that like button.
Blake Baker was on Off the Bench this morning with Jacob Hester and Matt Flynn. Great conversation. Guys spent about 16 minutes or so with Coach Baker. If you missed it this morning, obviously OTB On Demand podcast, the OTB LSU YouTube channel, all of those things where you can find it. I recommend you go listen to the entire thing. But there were a couple things that really stood out to me in kind of the entirety of the 16-plus minute conversation. And one of them, again, LSU will open camp here, I believe, next week, actually, as a matter of fact. One of the things that really stood out was the guys asked Blake Baker the position group he would be keeping the closest eye on, or that he'd be watching the most early in training camp.
It's probably twofold. I think the safeties, especially with AJ Halsey coming in, most of the guys we had through spring practice, so you have somewhat of an expectation of those guys going into the fall camp. And the defensive tackle position, same thing. We got some new guys that weren't here in the spring. When you look at Bernard and the two freshmen, Buddy Mathis and Brandon Brown. But overall, I'd say the safety position is probably what I'll be and most interested in, seeing how those guys gel. I think you have to have such chemistry back there together, and we've been mixing and matching them this summer, and I think it'll be an intriguing position battle.
There should be no surprise there, for what it's worth. I mean, LSU a season ago was 76th in pass defense. The safety position isn't solely responsible for that. I mean, it's a group effort, pass rush, your corners, and all of that. But it was a weak spot. It was the weakest spot for LSU. It's why you saw them go out there and get Tamarcus Cooley. You heard Blake Baker mention AJ Halsey. Monsoor Delane even has some versatility to potentially play some safety, and you have some good depth pieces there. It's the position that's the linchpin for LSU's defense this year, like the one that really has to make the jump for them to get to where they want to be, to put that defense in a position to play, to get them to where they want to be, if that makes any sense. So it shouldn't be a surprise. That's where Blake Baker's answer went. I mean, I think that's where many of y'all's answers would go. That's where my answer would go when you talk about the defensive side of the ball. But in terms of what you're really looking for there, I mean, some physicality at the safety position I think would be absolutely fantastic. Look, you expect a little bit more of that with Jordan Gilbert's shoulder being healed, but tackling at the safety position for LSU was a big issue. And you're hopeful that guys like Halsey and Cooley and now a healthy Gilbert, and even behind them, I should say, can really take that group to the next level. Because the one thing LSU has is depth there. You have the quality frontline guys, or at least you assume, you expect now to have the quality frontline guys, because you wouldn't address that in the portal. You have a veteran in Gilbert, but you also have some really promising young talent behind it. Like, I will continue to go back to DeShawn Spears. I think you could see a potential breakout season for a guy like DeShawn Spears this year when he gets his opportunity to play. Look, I think everyone's expecting some combination of Halsey and Gilbert to be out there as your starting guys. But there is opportunity for rotation. And DeShawn Spears is really the guy that I really hone in on. You have Toviano, you have Rogers, you have those guys as well. But Spears was the number 3 safety, a 5-star coming out of Denham Springs in the class of 2024. And before you went and added the guys that you did in the portal and Halsey and Cooley and things like that, DeShawn Spears was your second highest graded safety returning. So it's in there. So I like that aspect of that room a lot too. But it absolutely is the safety position. Because that's the one thing you're really missing on this defense. Said earlier in the show, I think LSU arguably is the best at linebacker in the entire country. Arguably. And I think the defensive line can really be a strength for you. Safety's gonna have to really watch that. The other thing, or I should say one of the other things that Blake Baker said that I found very, very interesting, because it just kind of drives home something that Brian Kelly has been talking about all offseason, and that's how they're treating the Clemson game. And that wasn't the question that was asked of Coach Baker. This was Matt Flynn that asked the question. He asked it about install and when your installation switches to game plan. And listen to what Blake Baker said right at the start, just offered up on his own free will.
The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result, right? And I think that's the coolest thing about Coach Kelly, man. He's always learning. He's always adapting. I think he does it year to year based off the opponent. Also, who is on our current roster. And I think we have a very mature roster that can handle, us. Some when you have a young team, sometimes you can build it up too much, right? And so I think he does a fantastic job with that. But I'm excited about it. I know we're doing some things differently in fall camp, and we haven't gotten necessarily into the nuts and bolts of what those things are going to be. But, again, I think it's just created a little more sense of urgency with our guys, too.
I wanted to play that one, but that's my fault. I didn't want to play that one right there. I gave Jordan the wrong cut. Jordan, let's go to number 3. This was the question about install, when install flips to game plan. Okay, no problem. We're getting that cut for you here. Again, that's on me. That one's my bad there. I do want to come back to what he said in that cut about the Clemson game because it ties into another one that we were going to play. But here's when install flips to game preparation.
To be honest with you, that last week of spring ball, we started introducing, Clemson and some of their base plays and honestly some of their problem plays just to kind of get a look at what we think we might like going into fall camp. So, yeah, and I think, Coach Kelly's been open and talked about it. It's something that we've talked about with our guys throughout spring, throughout summer. So I think, from a base installation standpoint, we'll be very similar to really how we were in the spring and how the summer. And then once we start getting into probably about week 2.5, we'll really start probably flipping that switch a little bit.
How about that? The end of spring, they were already looking at Clemson. Some of their base plays, but he said even some of the problem plays. Like that, we've heard Brian Kelly throughout the offseason talk about, there's paw prints everywhere and 1-0, and like they are not running from the opponent. They're not making any bones about who they're playing. Like, we know it is about Clemson, but taking it as far as, man, in spring practice, they're working on Clemson already. And Blake Baker tells you that allows them to help kind of keep it to a similar time frame here in the fall, where about 2.5 weeks into camp, you could see that really start to shift again, kind of like it did in spring. And then that kind of ties into the cut we played before that about the emphasis on the Clemson game. And the thing that I loved he said there was the maturity of the team. Because when Brian Kelly first talked about this in the offseason, I was filling in for Matt, and we talked about it here on the show. And I said, man, you know what? I don't hate that they're doing that, but it does bother me because anytime you put the emphasis on one game so much, you run the risk of that taking on so much importance that it makes it harder to bounce back from it if it doesn't go well. We saw it for years under Les Miles with the Alabama game. But Blake Baker talking about the maturity of the team, that they think they have a team that can handle that. And he even said, with young guys, you run the risk there. It becomes too big. It's harder to bounce back, all those things. That's huge. And it plays into another conversation that he had with the guys about the combination of personalities that are on not only this LSU team, but are on this defense and how important that can be for them here in 2025.
I think it's probably spread out across the board like you just talked about when you've got a really, really good, strong group of upperclassmen mixed in with some younger classmen that have played some football as well. But those guys, they spend more time in the weight room and out on the field running 110s than they do, in practice, especially this time of year. So to see those guys in that leadership, getting out there for some team runs this summer and watching them, man, it's imperative. And the unselfishness, again, we have a lot of really good players, in my opinion, but they're all bought into one common goal. So that makes it we got a chance to have a special unit based off of those things.
The importance of that, to me, cannot be overstated. And I know it sounds really simple to say. Obviously, like, well, yeah, of course you want your team to get along, right? But It's just not always the case in the transfer portal era. And when you have guys like Whit Weeks on that defense, and you're able to bring in a guy like a Jack Pyburn, right, who just from day one was loud and vocal around his teammates and is a guy they consider a leader, that helps acclimate everyone else you brought into the transfer portal in. And a lot of the credit goes to the staff as well. They're out there in the portal. They're looking for that. They know what they're looking for. Blake Baker, he talked a little bit about that, about how, man, it starts. You know, you have a relationship with a coach. It's probably on staff over there where the player's coming from, and you talk to them and you see who's going to best fit your culture. You've heard Brian Kelly talked about part of the transfer portal and being able to go and be aggressive in it is establishing the culture at the program that you were at. And he had to do that. And it's not always going to work. The team is not always going to gel, and it's not always going to be the perfect chemistry. Bringing in this influx of new guys, you're bringing in new egos. These guys, a lot of times, are coming from a smaller school. Not every time, but a lot of the time, they were one of the best at that school. And they're seeking a bigger stage and a bigger opportunity. Sometimes it's not going to jive. It sounds like it has very much with this LSU team. And it's not just the coaches saying it, it's the players. But you have a great mix of the leadership, the rah-rah guy, if you will, with everybody else. And it can help focus you when you buy into the culture on that one common goal. And that's where you look at this and go, okay, it's the combination of personalities that help lead to the maturity of your football team that ease the concern a little bit about putting so much emphasis on this opener. Like, we have to go out there and win this opener. I mean, that's what they're saying in there. And that helps ease the concern about it. What if it doesn't go well? Because, y'all, there's a chance. There's a really good chance it doesn't go well. But if you have that strong foundation, you have that strong culture and the understanding of, man, it's going to clear your path a little bit, but it doesn't derail your goals. That is absolutely huge. And lastly, from Blake Baker, the obligatory Harold Perkins, Whit Weeks question. We know they're cleared, but he did go in depth about how they plan to be pretty careful and have a detailed plan about how they're going to use Perkins and Weeks in training camp after they come back from these injuries.
We're obviously going to be smart with them in fall camp, and they can't be too big of a meathead where, like, no, coach, I'm good, and you're really not. So it's something, when you talk about kind of position group-wise, like who I'm going to be making sure I'm paying attention to, I'll definitely, and it helps having experience with both those guys with making sure that they look crisp. And with today's technology and everything, and with GPSs, we can find out very, very quickly from an analytical standpoint as well. But they've had outstanding summers. Both are moving at full speed, and again, we're smart with the volume, especially early on with them.
It'll be very interesting to watch. I mean, you expect big seasons from both of those guys, Harold Perkins and Whit Weeks, especially with Perk kind of more in that star role this year where everybody thinks that he will flourish. All right.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.